Welcome to Toot Your Own Horn, Music Matters. Today I am here with Scott Weinhold. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
I,
great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you, and I'm very much looking forward to you telling your story. How did your musical journey begin?
Great question. uh, it, my earliest memory, and I'm assuming well, I guess as a small kid, I had an older brother who was about 6 years old, and I think my earliest memories of enjoying music were sort of listening to the rock bands that he listened to, and so I can remember, well, playing rock band. At home, we would dress up and play air guitar or actually use like a broom or something. But pretty early on, I heard a saxophone. Actually, it was on the Benny Hill show of all things, which the probably was too young to be watching that show, but I was. And the theme song was Boots Randolph, Yakety Sax. And so I think that's the first memory I have of hearing the saxophone and deciding that's what I wanted to do. And I would say it was probably first or second grade, I guess. Some are pretty early on, and that just knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Do as in like you had to play it, or like you thought it was going to be a lifetime pursuit, or like what?
I don't think I thought that far ahead.
Okay.
I think I just knew that I wanted to play that instrument. I always just enjoy, and there were, Foreigner, and then there was Chicago and other bands, that had saxophone. There wasn't a lot of music in my house. Nobody else in my family. Well, my brother played in rock bands, but nobody was a formally trained musician. So there wasn't a lot of, we didn't have a record collection, and then in those days it was whatever came on the radio. That's what you listened to. So it was either through TV, and as I listen back now as an adult, I hear the music of cartoons, and I can kind of understand also what might have sort of led me towards, more of a jazz, pop, rock style music.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't think I just knew that I liked that sound, and that's what I wanted to do. Because I know when I did we started musical instruments in fifth grade. I do know that I wanted to play saxophone, and my parents tried get me to play clarinet instead because it was cheaper. But I insisted on playing saxophone.
Mm-hmm. And so you started out saxophone in fifth grade, and then what happened?
Mhm. So then we moved. I actually grew up in New Hampshire, and we moved to Mississippi, where they started in sixth grade.
Okay.
So it was, I guess I got a little bit of a jump on everybody because I'd already had a year of instruction. And then we moved to upstate New York a year later. And I was back to where students had started in fifth grade again. But I was, I continued to play in band. And it was just something I always enjoyed. And so I stayed on saxophone until seventh or eighth grade. I don't recall now. I had a band director who was a saxophonist and sort of recognized that I was a little bit ahead of most other students. Well, yeah, most other students. So he had me playing different saxophones. That's when I was introduced to playing the Barry sax. And then he gave me a bass clarinet
Oh.
and gave me a book and said, you should learn how to play this. So I did. So I started my clarinet playing actually on bass clarinet sometime in I think it was seventh grade.
Hmm.
And then my younger sister played flute, but she'd never practiced or really showed much interest. So I taught myself how to play flute on her flute. So then throughout high school, that's when I sort of started doubling. I also got into the choir and started singing as well, and sort of started teaching myself piano a little bit, just as much as I could by ear.
Mhm. What do you attribute that connection to? Like, what do you think connected you more than your sister, or what made you keep going?
I I think some of it was I had friends who were in the band. I
Mhm.
think there's no doubt to that. I think when we moved, especially you moving at that young age, that was sort of my outlet, something I had a great interest in. I mean, I had other interests as well. Like I was interested in computers early on, but we didn't have one, and computers were nothing compared to what they are now. So it wasn't like I could spend hours doing it. But otherwise, I don't know that there's any single factor I can attribute it to. I think I was always someone who's I'm a bit of an introvert, so I enjoy I value my solitude.
Mhm.
And I think practicing and playing music is something that requires quite a bit of, we spend a lot of time in the practice room honing our craft and getting better at it. And so it just sort of naturally fit my personality to take an instrument. And in fact, I was just telling an anecdote the other day. When I was in college, my first year, the music building was being renovated, so we had to practice in the dorm. And I remember hearing someone knock on my door, screaming at me to just please play another effing scale. After whatever I was playing it over and over again, until it was as good as I could make it. So I think that's always sort of fit my personality, I suppose. And I just never questioned whether or not I enjoyed it, if that makes sense. It was just sort of, enjoyment.
Mhm. Were people around you supportive?
Yeah. Yeah, they were. Especially my mother. You know, um, my brother played guitar. Another funny anecdote. I actually thought I wanted to be a guitar player, but I was a chubby kid. So my brother told me that fat people look stupid with guitars. So, so yeah, I guess I could thank him for me becoming a better saxophone player.
That's
But I guess that's supportive, right? In its own way. Uh,
it's a funny thing.
but yeah, we didn't have the financial means for me to be able to do a lot of the things I wanted to, and but my mother always seemed to find a way to, you know, uh, like when I got to high school and did start playing clarinet more, she did find a way to get me a clarinet. Um, so, like I said, I basically stole my sister's flute. And then, getting a better saxophone when I got into high school and kind of needed to have something a little better than the student model instrument that I had.
Yeah. So by the time you got to high school, what was your attitude about what the future was for you in music?
I would say by the time I was a sophomore or junior, I knew that I wanted to be a music major. I think I just continued to enjoy it, and I did seem to excel at it. Um, I also, again, I guess should of my story seemed to be somewhat negative, but I had a math teacher. I like math as well, and he got upset. I probably did something, that now as a teacher I would have been just as irritated as he was at me. But basically, when I told him I wanted to do music for a living, he said, "Well, good luck." And so I took that as a challenge. Like, okay, I'll show him. Yeah. And I had an all county, like we had an all county in upstate New York. I had one of those conductors also give me, and he was right. Again, thinking back as an adult, I was playing too loud, and he gave me he told me I would never make it in the professional world. Uh, so I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just, but it was a good lesson. He was right. I was playing loud. I don't think he needed to quite be that negative about it, but.
What did it mean to be a music major to you? Like, what did you think that was going to mean?
I think early on, all I ever focused on was wanting to get better. And I again, didn't necessarily have a concrete plan. I did do an education degree at first. And that was my father was like, hey, you should, have a backup plan. That's what basically we tell everyone, right?
Right.
It is a tough industry. And, but yeah, I was just focused on being better. In fact, I think my high school yearbook where they said, we had to give a senior quote or your life ambition. And I said, I just wanted to be a paid musician. Like I really just wanted to be able to do that and get paid to do it. And I had no sense of what that really meant at the time, except that I just wanted to keep doing it and figure out how to get paid to do it.
Mhm. What is it that makes it so sticky? If someone is listening, trying to understand what makes somebody want to keep working at something, what is it about that experience that made you want to keep working at it, getting better?
For me personally, yeah, and I tell this to my students a lot. For me personally, it was we use the term labor of love a lot. I never had to fake the motivation to just keep going and keep getting better, and wanted to put as much time into it as possible. And I do tell myself, I haven't done any private lessons in the last couple of years since I'm now teaching band full time, but um, I do tell people, if you don't absolutely love this and can't imagine yourself doing anything else, you might want to reconsider, because I think that's, at least as a performer, that really is the level of motivation I feel like you need to have. So that doesn't quite answer your question, but because that doesn't help the people who maybe are on the fence, or I think it's just more about being realistic with them. But because I have a lot of students also who don't want to be music majors, and I kind of tell them the same thing, that going into it as a business or trying to make money can sometimes take some of that joy out of it. So I'm envious of people who keep doing it, but it's more of a hobby at times. But it just, music requires so much of the brain and so many different parts of the brain, and that ability to focus like that, to really do it at a high level. So, yeah.
It does. But that's a very common thing. You hear so many people say once they get going and they start improving, they just want to keep going and going. That it's kind of addictive.
Yeah. I guess we all have to have some level of OCD. I mean, someone listening on the outside is like, just play another scale, please. And I didn't realize I had been playing, whatever I was playing for 30 minutes straight. I don't know. Right. When you start to notice the passage of time, that's when that focus and that lack, interest starts to fade.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen. It does happen now, I'm not going to lie. But definitely when I was younger, I never had to think about that.
Yeah. So where did you go to college?
So I did my undergrad at the College of St. Rose in upstate New York, Albany, New York, small private school. It's actually, they closed their doors and they went bankrupt 2 or 3 years ago and closed their doors, unfortunately. And then I did a master's degree at CCM, the University of Cincinnati. And then later on, I went and started what was going to be a DMA at Indiana University that I never finished. So I went to those 2 schools.
Mm-hmm. And that ed degree served you well, because along the way, obviously you've become a teacher, but you must have also been performing. My guess is you've done both.
Yeah. So, finished the education degree, and I decided that I wanted to keep getting better. That led me to the University of Cincinnati, CCM, where I got a master's degree in saxophone performance. And then from there, I got out of school and ended up getting a job with the Glenn Miller Orchestra. So I was playing, I think I played 3 different chairs on that band. Well, in the course of my tenure with them, I was on the road for about a year. And then I came back to Cincinnati and was trying to make a go of freelancing and a mixture. I was actually teaching public school for about a year in Cincinnati. Decided that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And that's when I decided to go back to school to Indiana. And I was actually going to get a degree in jazz studies at that time. With David Baker was still there, and I got the opportunity to study with David. And then from there, it's kind of a long, convoluted story, but from there, someone convinced me to take an audition for the military bands here in Washington, D.C. Whereas earlier in my career, some friends did that. I told them they were crazy. There's no, of the 4 of us that graduated together, I was the one who ended up doing it. But I think, without going through full detail, I did end up taking an audition, and I got a job working on a cruise ship in Europe. So I actually ended up leaving Indiana to go out, and David Baker actually said, "Go out there and play. You're going to learn more playing than you will here." I was headed towards maybe trying to be a university level teacher or college. So yeah, then I spent probably about off and on doing different contracts, one in Europe, one in the Mediterranean. I worked on a couple of cruise ships, at this point, like as a doubler. So I would bring in 2 saxophones, a flute, and a clarinet, and just play shows or play whatever was needed. then I got a job. Let's see, then I didn't win the first audition with the Army. Then I went back to Cincinnati. I took an audition, won a job with the Air Force. But there's actually, um, I couldn't make the weight standards for the Air Force, so they told me I couldn't take the gig unless I lost some more weight. So I got another job on a cruise ship, which is, it's where you go to lose weight, right? Is on a cruise ship. But working on them, I could have a little more control over that. And by the time I came off that ship, the Army had another opening here in Washington, D.C. The Air Force job was one of the post bands. So it was one of the lower status job, I guess is one way to put it, where I was going to have to go wherever the Air Force needed me, as opposed to getting a permanent station here with one of the DC special bands. So when I came off the ship, the Army had another audition, but it wasn't going to be for another few months. So I told the Air Force I really wanted to take that job, if I could, because the Army was offering loan repayment program at that time. So they're going to pay off any student loans I had. Plus it was a permanent duty station, higher rank, higher pay. So then I ended up on the road with the Tommy Dorsey orchestra for a short period. Won that job, and then the rest was sort of history. I joined the Army band in 2001 and spent 22 and a half years in the Army band playing saxophone for the Army. I did, my favorite inaugural parade was the time I got to play piccolo, because it is so much lighter than a tenor saxophone when you're out there for hours. Even though it's impossible to play piccolo with like 3 layers of gloves in January and all the keys are freezing, but I didn't care because it was lighter. And then all the time I was in the Army here, I was actually running a jazz program at a local high school, which ultimately is where I am now. Someone retired, and I was able to convince them that I'd be a good fit for the program. And so I've been teaching school now this is my third year.
What are your greatest memories from the Army?
To me, the most rewarding job I ever did was, I came in the summer of 2001, which was just before 9/11. And I got to do a series of USO tours over in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait. And so for me, that was one of the most meaningful jobs I ever did, was to be able to go over there and support our troops who were overseas. And hopefully, even though I was just the saxophone player in the band, but I like to think that maybe for that period that we were up there entertaining them, they could just forget about where they were for a minute and enjoy themselves. So that was the most rewarding. I also, later on in my career, as I, moved up the food chain, they do give you more responsibility. I ultimately ended up as the senior producer. So I was responsible for coordinating and managing our large scale events, making sure we had contracts for lighting and audio. And so I got to learn a lot more about music production and not just the performing side of it. And I also coordinated logistics for travel and larger things. So I got to be the producer for a military to military exchange with the Chinese PLA band. And so that was another fond memory of mine, was doing. It was stressful, but also just an amazing thing to be part of.
Mm-hmm. The thing that's always amazing to me about all of the military groups is that while you have a full-time job, there's enough room in your schedule to still do other things. Were you one of those people that did other things, or were you one of those people that just took advantage of the time off?
Oh, well, I taught, I did other things.
Yeah.
Like I said, for most of my career, I started running this jazz ensemble, I think my second year here.
Okay.
So I was teaching, that was two days a week plus performances. And in fact, that in that time frame, I took that ensemble, which was, 20 students, and I grew it into 3 ensembles, including a middle school band. And I think last year we had 85 students involved across, 3 ensembles. So, and I also, I have a lot of hobbies. I got really into triathlon. So I spent a lot of time doing triathlon. The older I get, the harder that gets. So that's not as big a part of my life as it used to be. You know, I love to travel. And yeah, so those two things took up quite a bit of my time.
Yeah. So if somebody was listening to this podcast and really just loved your story, what would you tell them to engage in playing a wind instrument right now?
You know, the one, and I do say this a lot. I think number one is you have to enjoy what you do. So hopefully you do. But I think you have to have an open mind about what you're going to be doing. So, you know, and that can sound negative, but I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, I'm so grateful for what the Army Band did for me, you know, for the opportunities I've had. That doesn't mean that I've been playing the latest and greatest saxophone literature for the last 20 years, you know? So I think if you can always be focused on being thankful and have gratitude for the fact that you are able to play your instrument and get paid for it, regardless of what you're playing. In fact, I told a group of students at Cincinnati, where my good friend is now was the head of the performance department studies. I'm not sure if he still is, but he teaches saxophone there. And I said, listen, you know, to make a living doing this, you have to realize that it's not going to be the recitals that you do in college, you know, and 90% of what you play is probably going to be music that someone else picked, and you're going to play it the way they would like you to play it, you know. So you have I think that mindset helped me be thankful when I walk into a rehearsal and the conductor says, play that softer or play this note shorter, or can you know, I think the ability to do those things will serve anyone better than saying, well, you know, I think I should do it this way. Because I was also, you know, responsible for some of the auditions and determining whether or not people got the job, but, you know, as we were doing the hiring process. And that's really one of the things we look for is, hey, if I ask you to play this slightly differently, can you do it? You know, I'm not looking for the guy who's going to come in here and play something and will be, you know, want to say, wow, nobody's ever thought to play it that way, because they probably have. So I think that would be my advice, is that just, you know, learn to be grateful and thankful for that opportunity to play your instrument.
Why do you think it is that musicians, I mean, I know it's really hard to learn how to play a wind instrument. There's no question. There's so many moving parts, and it's complicated because you also have to learn to read music, and it does become a process of sort of, I don't want to say self-absorption, but it kind of does. You know, you have to really focus on yourself and connect the dots to get it to work. But why is it that we are not more trained to understand our role in community? Because your experiences you shared are so touching because they affect people's lives. Music touches people. And I think all too often we don't realize that that's our job, right?
Yeah. And again, I take, you know, I consider myself an entertainer. You know, yes, I play these woodwind instruments, but like, and even the kids, we have a traditional event we do at the end of the year at a small club, and I'm a ham and I tell bad jokes, but people have fun and they enjoy it. And yeah, I think that is an important element of music that I think gets missed, is that we're really, at the end of the day, we're trying to connect with people, you know, and no one wants to go, I don't think, well, I don't want to say no one, that's not fair to say, but, you know, given how difficult it is for some orchestras now to fill their seats, I think the ones that are doing better are the ones that have learned how to engage the audience. Like, you know, it's okay to talk to them between the songs and maybe tell them a little bit more about what you're doing. Not, hey, we're better than you. We understand art. You don't. Sit down, listen, take the cough drop so I don't have to hear you cough. You know, I think we have to remember that we are trying to connect with people. And, you know, and I definitely learned that from the Army. That was literally our job, you know, connect the Army to the people. And I think we did a good job of doing that. So I think that's a hard thing to teach. You know, I remember, like, just to give another anecdote, there was a big flute solo that someone in the Army used to do in the Army band, and they retired. And then the conductor who had been there when he was a more junior conductor wanted to recreate this piece because it was such a big hit in the concert. And the our chief arranger suggested that I play it because I do improvise. And with the flute players, I thought they were going to kill me. They got so mad because a non-flute player was going to take away the flute solo. And I wasn't taking anything away, in my opinion, that I was being asked to do it. And yes, they're far better flute players than I am. But I think when he did it, the piece didn't go over as well. And I think what it was missing was their lack of understanding that it wasn't about the notes. It wasn't about the playing a flute. It was about they were playing a flute. Yes, this guy played flute, but what this performer was really good at doing was selling it. And I think we also many of us will sort of look down on people who sell out. Play music that's not hard, but your music doesn't have to be difficult to be really good. And I think there's a way to balance those things. Say, okay, yeah, and I do it too. I'm playing a solo in a funk band or something, and I start to do flashy things that we all know are just wiggling my fingers, So I'm guilty, but I think there's a way to keep integrity to what you're doing, and but you have to. That stage presence is hard to teach.
How do you do that with your kids?
Force them to smile. I think that is hard. With kids, my big push with the younger students is to try and just get them to try things, but maybe get up and play. I think I also just try to lead by example. Like I mentioned, that year-end event, or we do twice a year. I go out into local retirement homes, and we do a lot of big band swing, and I try to lead by example and show them like how I engage with the audience as their MC for the evening, and make it fun.
Do you have kids that want to show off?
Yes, I do.
How do you handle them?
Can you explain a little more what you mean by show off?
Meaning that I sort of feel like part of the challenge, in my opinion, is that so many of the people that go on in music were the best kids, right? And so first chairs, and they played all the solos, and they got all the glory and the attention. And so they I don't want to say they're entitled to it, but there's this kind of like, look at me, like I'm really good, right?
Yeah.
And I just wonder, how do you harness that, or can you even harness that in youth? Because usually the ones that are showing off are the better ones, right? Because they're
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily, and that's a great question. And as I'm trying to answer it, I'm thinking back to how rare that's been for me in my program, at least, and it partially because I'm running the jazz ensemble. And that's sort of, I've been playing professionally in big bands for a long time. I had a dark beard when I started. In fact, I don't even, and I was actually thinking back, I've been playing in a big band of one form or other since I was in 7th or 8th grade. It's just, all that to say, I think this, maybe the kids don't hold that attitude with me normally.
awesome.
I also pull out my instrument and play a lot. And so if I can pull out my instrument and say, yeah, sounds great. And, show them that I can do it too. I'm not saying we all have to do that, but I actually just realized how grateful I am that I rarely have to deal with that. And also because
How do you harness that humility? Because that's humbleness and humility.
yeah,
That's remarkable, because you do sometimes associate, like you can definitely associate whether it's there or not with teachers. You can, in our shop, which I wouldn't name, because sometimes people will come in from certain studios and I can tell they have big egos and they're still in college and they don't respect people who have lots of experience. And I don't want to say it's their teacher, but it comes from their lineage, so to speak. Right.
yeah. And I'd have to think really hard to find an example of that. And even to think I mean, I will say, the DC area is extraordinary and unusual, and that because we have the premier military bands here, many of our students, especially the top ones, are studying with the military musicians. And so, it's very easy. Like, I mean, I could name 15 saxophone players in this town that are light years ahead of me, as players. So it's just, there's just such a large talent pool that maybe that's part of it. I think the other thing is that I tend to get the better kids, meaning not just playing wise, but just better kids in our band program, and specifically in the jazz ensemble. I think some of it's just the way I carry myself a little bit, which is, with a fair amount of, I like what I do, and I've had a lot of experience, and that does, because they've heard me play with the Army Blues Jazz Ensemble, so they've heard that band and they know what that sounds like, and they know that's where I'm coming from. Yeah, but I mean, in terms of showing off, I guess what I was thinking was I do shtick once in a while, I don't force the kids to do it, but whenever I see a kid that's willing to do it, I get them involved in that. And like, I had a clarinet player last year, 2 years ago, I'm sorry, super, super talented kid. He's a dual major right now. And all I had to do was explain to him what circular breathing was. And like the next day he came back and he could do it.
Seriously. Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, you know how long it took me to figure that out, So we did a shtick. We did the Benny Goodman Sing, 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 and I had him learn Benny Goodman solo. Actually, I found a more difficult one because he was already playing the one that everybody knows pretty well, and he did great on that. And so I had him hold a high B on clarinet and circular breathe, and we made a whole thing about it. And then he walked out of the room while still playing the note, and then So, yeah, I'm very lucky. I guess I've just had kids like that and that student was just totally humble. Yet super talented. So,
Scott, I really appreciate you doing this with me. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know you're very busy teaching, and so thank you very, very much for doing this. You're on Facebook, right?
yes, I try to stay away from it, but I am on Facebook. Yes,
I just wondered if I could tag you there. It's
absolutely
awesome. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much for spending time with me.
Thank you. You too. Take care.